Good morning. Welcome back to Budget 2022 deliberations. It is day 4. We are currently still in the capital budget deliberation portion of our discussions. We are going to start off with a list of referred items. They're items that Council referred to budget deliberation over the past few months. As well, there are 3 items that aren't on the chart if you're watching on screen, added to that deferred item. Nitehawk capital request for $19,125, a capital land lease capital request for $81,250, and the combined heat power unit sound attenuation at a recommendation of $500,000. So we will start this morning with our referred items, as I mentioned. Council, we've gone through these for questions for administration, so I'll be looking for business arising. And a reminder, that's a motion to start the conversation, and then we'll debate the motion, please. So we'll start at the top. Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I would like to move that we support the capital request for the Richmond Industrial Area Revitalization Strategy. And to speak to this is one of our oldest areas in the city, not unlike what we've had to deal with in the recent past. And infrastructure is a necessity to keep these businesses going.
Just clarification, Councillor Bosch, it currently is funded in 2024. Is your motion to move the $2.6 million into 2023?
No, to continue to keep it in 2024.
So then we don't require a motion for that. We're good. Oh. It's already there. Okay. Moving on, the urban forestry strategy phase 1, as you heard yesterday, was entrance feature enhancements. Phase 2 is a cluster of trees along Highway 43. Mr. Glavin, just clarify that for me, please.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So phase 1A is adding trees to the entrance signs on the west and north ends, as well as adding groves along 100th Avenue between 116th and 112th Street. And phase 2 is the development of a formal urban forest strategy.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Blackmore.
I would move that the urban forest strategy, both line items, which I don't have in front of me. So I would move that the urban forest strategy phase A and phase 1A and phase 2 be included in the 2023 budget. And in speaking to this, I think that this moves the city into a place that's much more wonderful to live in. It works towards our main goals of, what are our main goals?
Quality of life.
Quality of life. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word quality, but there we go.
Awesome works too.
Awesome works too. I really encourage council to support this. A forest strategy takes a long time to build and get in place, and delaying it just delays the end result. So I really encourage council to look towards building a more beautiful and awesome city.
Okay. Motion is in order. I just have one additional piece from that. I need you to identify a preferred funding source for debate. Ms. Whiteway, did you have a suggestion for Councillor Blackmore?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. It would be at this time capital tax that I'd recommend.
I would add that to the motion for capital tax as a source.
That's in order. Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, I will be supporting this motion. I think it's the right thing to do. It's part of what we have recognized to make our city a better place to be attractive to come and move to. So I would support this motion.
Perfect. Any other comments or questions on funding the urban forest strategy? Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clayton. Yeah, I too am in favor of this. I've always been in favor of planting more trees. What I really like about this is a thoughtful approach taken that incorporates partnerships and people who are in the forestry industry as well. And anytime that we can engage industry and expertise and partner it up with our own expertise, we're doing good. What we see every year when we do our surveys is that parks are at the top of the list of all of our resident satisfaction. Also, by doing this, we are promoting biodiversity, encouraging bee populations. We're actually getting rid of dandelions in some areas, I would imagine. That was part of the debate a few days ago. And it helps with flood mitigation. So there's lots of really good positives. I've only listed a few of them, but this is great. Thanks, Councillor Blackmore, for including this.
All right, call the question. Welcome, Wood.
Councillor Blackmore in favor.
Councillor Bosch in favor.
That left, so that's why it's not working. As soon as an IT person comes back to the room, everything fixes. As soon as they leave, it breaks. All right, we have our votes submitted. Councillor Berg, e-scribe's working for him, I'm assuming. We're good, yeah?
Yep.
All right,
Fine.
perfect. Okay, so that carried unanimously. Ledge Services looking at me like I'm missing something, but yeah, we're good. Okay, back to the deferred slide. As you'll see, the next item there is the Legion Field update, the Grande Prairie Curling Club feasibility study. Well, I will go through them unless somebody pops in a queue. I already mentioned the Legion. So I'm going to make a motion that we fund the Grande Prairie Curling Center feasibility study in additional $28,500. I do have a question, and don't tell me capital tax. What's my other option? Ms. Whiteway.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. You do have your council strategic initiatives fund, as well as there is a little in our unallocated future expenditures reserve, around $1.5 million.
So as this is a study to potentially enhance a facility, could it not come out of facility renewal?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I don't believe that that would qualify for a renewal. Normally we do repairs, upgrades to a facility, so physical actual changes to a facility is what the policy indicates.
All right. So we'll put that funding source as capital tax. Speaking to that motion, in my opinion, this is a facility that can be utilized for multiple other organizations in the off season. It could, we also know in communities such as Fort St. John was mentioned to us earlier this week, that if they're not utilizing half the rinks, which they didn't over time, the rinks were being used for other activities. So there's multiple opportunities, whether in the summer this could be pickleball, potentially maybe it could be lacrosse. I don't know what those options are, and I know council doesn't know. So that's what this additional money will bring to us. We own this building, as the community is aware, therefore it needs to be fully utilized. It makes no sense for us to own a building that's utilized 6 months a year. So in order to figure out what the possibilities are, I suggest that we go ahead with this feasibility study, and I encourage council to support it. Comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Councillor Bosch in favor.
Councillor O'Toole in favor? That's carried unanimously. Moving along through the list, indoor climbing wall, Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I'm actually sorry I was a little slow in the draw. I'm just wondering about the Legion Field update. Could that be split over 2 years, or is it?
So administration answered the question yesterday, no. In order to be the activities to be completed in time for the provincials that Grande Prairie will host, it needs to be done in 2023.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we fund this. And if I heard Ms. Whiteway correctly, I thought, is that about what we have left in the future expenditures reserve?
Ms. Whiteway?
Thank you. Yeah, we have 1.5 million.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we take it out of future expenditures reserve for the full
And
amount,
just so
please.
you're clear, there's also a motion to take capital spending from roads for future expenditures, so you won't be able to do both.
Yeah, I was looking at roads differently, I guess, that way.
Okay.
So I'm fine with the motion as is. If somebody wants to amend it for funding streams, I'm fine with that as well. I just think if we're going to have games, it's nice to be ready for them, and I just think we need to support this.
Councillor Bressie.
Could I ask one question of admin? I'm curious, could you remind me again? So I know this is required if we want to host provincials in 2024, but if we're not interested in provincials, is it, I forget, is it still serving those local and just regional track meets?
Mr. Lemieux?
So
If you need us to come back, we totally can.
no, that's fine. I think I can. So what I wanted to point out is that the local track and field body has been given conditional approval for to host the 2024 provincial competition, but it's pending these site improvements. And would the site improvements benefit other competitions, regional competitions? Absolutely. But the impetus here is for the local track and field body to be able to host the 2024 provincials, but that's pending these site improvements.
Yeah, and sorry, that wasn't quite my question. What I'm trying to figure out is it still meeting the need for those regionals? So if we don't do something, is the more regional, local type of track meet at risk?
Mr. Lemieux?
Okay, I will double check on that.
Okay, we'll come back to that one. Councillor Thiessen?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Clayton. I've got just for you, Mr. Lemieux, if I may ask a question. Yesterday you said the long jump needed to be fixed and moved. What were the other items in this 1.1 million of upgrades that we would be partaking in?
Mr. Lemieux?
Yeah, I can tell you that the biggest move was for that long jump, and there were a number of other smaller items. I don't have those in my fingertips, but I'll try and get that information.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Blackmore?
I will support the motion because I feel that if the biggest expenditure is the long jump, because it's no longer a viable piece of equipment, then we're not going to be able to support regional track meets either, because that means they can't do long jump, which is pretty important to regional track meets or track meets in general. Also, it bothers me when we have a city facility that deteriorates like this, and I don't think that it is in our long-term good health as a city to allow that to happen. So I encourage people to move forward with this motion. I just have a question for Ms. Whiteway. Is this not? Can we not take some money from facility renewal for this? That to me, that seems to be the most logical place.
Ms. Whiteway?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Clayton. Absolutely. It's a city facility. We could put some or all through renewal.
I have a question, and then I'll look for an amendment. You go ahead first, Mr. Lemieux.
I do have an answer on the question from Councillor Bressie. So the long jump area would still need to be repaired in order for us to allow regional competitions.
Go for it.
And could you remind me what the cost just for the long jump is again?
Look for that information.
Great, thank you.
I had a question. Mr. Lemieux, if you could also find out, or maybe you know this, did we ever have any discussion, as this would be a regional facility? I'm not aware of any other long jump facilities in the region. To your knowledge, not to my knowledge, maybe to some of my colleagues' knowledge, did we talk about this at regional rec at all, ever?
I don't believe that's been discussed at regional rec.
Okay. Also, Councillor O'Toole. It's on.
His.
It's not his fault.
I know that there was some concerns with the track. People were driving on it and caused some damage, and I was just wondering if that would include those repairs.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I will double check. My understanding is there are some repairs to the track that are part of this project.
Yes. Okay.
Councillor Blackmore.
I'm wondering if Councillor Palat would amend or restate his motion to change the funding source.
Mr. Brillat,
Yes, I'd be happy to do that.
can you say it?
Through facility renewal.
All right, thank you. So we'll just take a minute for, let's table the motion until Mr. Lemieux. Councillor Bressi, you make a motion to table, please.
Sure, I would move we table this until we have more information.
Okay. Call the question.
Councillor Thiessen in favor.
Councillor Bosch in favor.
Okay, so that's carried unanimously. Next item on the deferred items list is the indoor climbing wall. Councillor Bressi.
Great, thank you. I would move that council fund an indoor climbing wall with $115,000 funded by capital tax. And just to speak to this, what we heard yesterday was the cost for a smaller wall at the Activity Reception Center would be $84,000. The cost for a larger wall at the Eastlink Center would be $225,000. And sorry, I need to add a part to my motion.
Go for it.
So it's the motion to fund $115,000 with capital tax, but further direct administration to work with the climbing club to determine how best to deploy these funds. And what my thinking of that is, in my opinion, the bigger wall at the Eastlink Center with the visibility would be the better wall. That's also the more expensive wall. So my thinking with this is administration could work with the club, and if they decide they want to do the Eastlink Center one, well, then we can say to the club, you have to raise half the money for that. Or if they're okay with the smaller wall, we have the funds to do that at the Activity Reception Center. Just the other idea I'm throwing out is later in the conversation where I'm hoping that we'll take action to start working towards some new indoor rec on the Avondale site if we move towards that, and that's a big if, I know. But then the climbing club might also be able to say, well, hey, maybe we should hold on and see what that facility is so we can have something a bit more as for it. I think there's different options for it that we should determine in consultation with the climbing community, and if we're doing more than a basic wall, they should bring money to the table. But I'm comfortable funding the basics of a wall or half of a wall at the Eastlink Center. So I hope council will support this motion.
Mr. Lemieux, is it on the other item? Or is it on this?
It's on this item.
Okay,
So
perfect.
I just want to provide clarification because the information you've provided is in reverse. So for the 896 square foot wall at the Eastlink Center, the cost is $84,000. The cost of the larger wall is at the Activity and Reception Center, and that cost is $225,000.
Gotcha. No, thank you for clarifying that. That is important for council to know, but I don't think it changes what I want to do with the motion. So I appreciate that, but I think I don't want to change the motion because of it.
Okay. Just gonna wait for the motion to pop up. Comments or questions on the motion? Oh, sorry, I was looking under. Question on the intent of your motion, Councillor Bressi. If the club comes back and says the best use of this funds is buy climbing equipment, does that meet your needs? Or is your intent to have an asset of structure type?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by...
It says to work with the club to decide how to best use these funds. Well, what if they decide to best use them is to take a couple trips to Canmore?
Yeah, no, sorry. This is... and once again, I'm open to friendly amendments, but
Okay.
my intent is get a wall built in a public
Okay.
facility.
Okay. Just so we're clear.
And also, my intent is to consult with them. It's still our money, our facility. It's not saying, hey, let them make the decision.
Okay,
But they should very much be at the table while we make that decision as an organization.
perfect. Councillor Thiessen.
Thank you very much, Mayor Clayton. Yeah, I'm in support of this motion. I think it's thoughtful. We could bite out of the apple for them, so to speak. But much like pickleball, when we were getting advocated for those courts, the pickleball community really rallied together and helped raise money. There's also other options out there, sponsorships and stuff that can be obtained by these community groups or this community group. What we saw at that council meeting was probably about 40, maybe 50 people in here that were really passionate about having a climbing gym in this town. And with that amount of interest, I can imagine that they wouldn't have too much of a trouble trying to find as much sponsorship and revenue to help support the other costs associated with this. Much like Councillor Bressie said, they should be at the table too, considering they know climbing walls better than anybody else, and they should know what they're getting out of this deal. We can't assume that we can create it for them without them at the table. So. And finally, I think ownership has a lot to do with it too. If they put in the effort, the time, and the energy, I think it has a better chance to survive through the long term, in our facility or otherwise. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clayton, and I agree with Councillor Thiessen and Dylan Bressie's motion that involving the club, I think they made it very clear that they were willing to fundraise, so that may end up being a bigger facility. So I think involving them earlier is a lot better approach. Thank you.
Just a comment. I know our administration does a very thorough job of engaging all clubs, so I don't want to stress on this point for this particular club, because we actually engage with everybody. So anytime money is spent with a club, I know administration is consulting and working with them. So they're no different than other clubs. So, yeah. Councillor Bressie to close.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mayor Clayton. I really strongly agree with them. I think that why this is specific in this motion is because we're hoping that they can bring money to the table. And so really the motion isn't about telling our administration to do more work. Really, it's about, hey, I expect this club to do some work with it. Yeah. So it's more motion intended to make sure the clubs come into the table. So I appreciate that clarification, because our administration does do a great job of working with all user groups from my perspective.
Perfect. And sorry, anything to close, or you're good on that? Okay. Call the question. Please vote. You two are the trouble spot, apparently.
He's looking over our shoulder.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. You have IT over your shoulder. You're the trouble spot. That is carried unanimously. Next item on, actually, Mr. Lemieux, you give me a signal when you're ready to go back to, okay. We're ready to go back for questions on Legion Field. Mr. Lemieux.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So the whole project requires move of the long jump to provide the distance needed for that particular jump, and then the high jump area also needs to be resurfaced, and then the fence needs to be moved. The cost, unfortunately, isn't broken down just for the long jump, so that would have to be brought back to council, so I don't have that specific number. And the track itself does need repairs, but for the time being, it's mostly around repainting some lines for this competition to occur. And we're also working with the group to explore grant opportunities. There's a CFEP grant application in the amount of $125,000 that I believe is being worked on.
So I'll get in the queue before anybody. Who made the motion? Councillor Plott, would you be open to a friendly amendment in the amount up to $1.1 million? My point is that there's granting opportunities we just talked about. I think that there's potential conversations with regional partners, although it's fairly far down the road. But I just want to make sure that if those opportunities are there, we have those discussions. So if it's up to $1.1 million, then I think that it's clear and identified.
Yeah, I'd be happy to make that change to my motion.
Okay. Other comments or questions based on the information you received? Councillor Bressie. I see the button's not working, but I see your finger moving. Go for it.
There we go. My finger's too dry, apparently. Yeah, this is a hard one for me, and I don't think I can support it right now. I think two concerns I've got is I think this is a regional asset, and this should be talked about in a regional context. I'd love to see the provincials here, but I'd highlight that we're also spending significant money and significant resources getting the 2024 Winter Games here. And for me, that's a lot of resources we're putting into 2024 games, and that's a concern for me. It's a little bit too early. But also the bigger overriding concern for me is as we're looking, we haven't made any detailed decisions about the future of this kind of area of land. We've got a high-level planning concept, but we don't have money. We haven't actually even got anything in pencil for what's going on with this land. And for me, I think future development there is probably unlikely to impact this area, but it could. And for me, I hate to be hobbled by this decision. We can't maximize this area to its fullest extent. So for me, I really get the need. It's not this shouldn't be funded. It's I hate to say it, but I think it should wait another year. I'll just leave it at that, actually.
Councillor Plot.
This is for close. If I'm not sure if there's anybody else in the queue.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I guess I have concerns holding back on this for the track and field associations. What impact, if we don't pass this today, how much time do they need to make sure that they qualify for these games?
They won't. We were told yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Lemieux. Do you happen to know, I know today the bid committee is touring dignitaries, officials, whatever you'd like to call them, for the 2025 Special Olympics Summer Games. I'm assuming, but I could be wrong, is our current long jump area of this Legion Field suitable for that games? Or and to the point Councillor Blackmore made earlier, sometimes certain levels of games have different requirements. So it was good to hear that to know that it wouldn't work for regional, but sometimes a regional facility is fine compared to a provincial facility. So do we know if this would impact the Special Olympics or not?
I'm not able to answer that question. I don't know at this point. I could try and find out, but I don't know.
Okay. Councillor Palat to close, unless anyone else has anything. Go for it, Councillor Palat.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Clayton. I guess for me, I'm hoping we can support this. If we want to have even regional tournaments, it doesn't sound like our odds are very good if we don't have high jump and long jump. Definitely doesn't allow us to do provincial tournaments. And to Councillor Bressy's point, I can appreciate that we're worried about what this area could look like, but we were part of I guess I was fortunately part of a steering committee last term that worked with the school district on this area, and I'm more than confident that we're going to be putting a building somewhere that's not going to be affected this track. And actually, I would say the opposite of Councillor Bressy, in that this facility going up at some point, if we do build another court sport facility in that area, only actually makes this area stronger and better for us to host provincial and potentially even national tournaments at some point. So I think it's important that we're looking at all the different areas of sports in our community. And this is a field in an area that has been kind of overlooked for quite some time now. And I think it's just time we bring it back to the modern times so that organization can go after all the events they want to come to our community. It's a quality of life piece that we've talked about. And I think for this group, this is a huge quality of life piece. And for them to be able to host tournaments, they just simply can't at this point. So I encourage everybody to support this.
All right, that was Councillor Plot's close. I'll call the question. Just wait, Matt. IT hasn't left yet. All right. That is carried 6-3. To the deferred items. We are now at the fire training grounds. Then the Salvation Army funding request. Councillor Bressy.
Great, thank you, Mayor Clayton. I would move the council fund the Salvation Army funding request to $200,000 using the fiscal stabilization reserve. Just speak to this. We heard that 20% of our residents are using the food bank. That's unprecedented in my mind. I think that this reserve exists for unprecedented and unexpected times, so I think it's an appropriate use for this. And I think if we have residents going hungry, we're not building the safe, healthy community that we're tasked to build. So I hope the council will support this.
Councillor Blackmore.
I didn't catch the funding source. Can you repeat that?
Fiscal sustainability.
Okay. Yeah, I pressed my mic because I believe we need to put money into this and to support this. So I really have nothing else to say other than we can't let people go hungry.
Councillor O'Connor.
I am also in agreement that we need to push this project forward 20% is too large a number, and they need our help now. Thank you.
Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Clayton. Thanks for this motion. Councillor Bresser, you beat me to the punch on it, but I do like your approach. I likely would have probably just made a motion, a capital tax, and someone would have amended it. But there's a great need in our community for sustainability and for food security. In other parts of the country, some food banks are being used at a capacity of 60%, which is crazy to think in smaller communities and crazy to think when you put it in the context of Grande Prairie. When Mr. Kim came here, with this request, he note, and I will note again, that this is his first time he's ever come to the city for an ask in regards to dollars and supporting the food bank. And I think that's pretty much what we do as a council, is we do our best to look after our people and to ensure that they have not only a high quality of life, but that they're sustainable in their everyday. And food is one of those basic human rights that I think we should all chip into. So really appreciate the motion. I like it, especially from the funding source where it's coming from. And hopefully the Salvation Army can go another 60, 70 years without asking us again, and we can get on top of this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. I'll just jump in quickly. I agree with your comments. I think that let's recognize that there is a need now. This isn't an ongoing funding discussion. This is an emergent need. I think that also what's really important, as I mentioned yesterday, the Salvation Army kettles need support. The organization needs support. They need volunteers. They don't have enough people to work their shifts today and tomorrow, and it's the first weekend. So the community, we need the community to get behind it. Council, from what I'm hearing, supports this initiative. So we ask that the community please support the organization as well, because it's vital to the success for people that need it. Councillor Bressie to close.
Great, thank you. I'm glad we're going to support this. And also I would highlight, though, that this is a need that we don't want our community in the long term. And I think that the basic formula of people getting by is food's getting more expensive, housing's getting more expensive, utilities are getting more expensive. And this council is doing significant work on advocacy for utilities, and we've spent significant attention on housing affordability. And if you get those two down, then food doesn't become the problem it is. So this is an important one-time thing, but I also just want to highlight to the community, we really are working hard in the long term to make sure that this isn't a need going forward.
All right, so just so everyone's clear, the motion's in your E-Scrad that $200,000 be funded from the Financial Stabilization Reserve to support the Salvation Army. I'll call the question. That carries unanimously. On the deferred list, the remaining items, vital signs funding request for $20,000. Councillor Blackmore.
I'm going to suggest that we fund this through gift in kind. Much of the information, I would say 80% of the information that is in the vital signs report is pulled from the studies that we as a city have already done. And so I feel that if they're using our information to start with, we are in fact funding them by a gift in kind, and I don't think we need to give them actual cash.
That motion is in order. Councillor Thiessen.
Oh, goodness. I've been on a good roll. I haven't spoken against Councillor Blackmore's motions or anything she said, all budget, but here we go. I think with the vital signs, we always do give that gift in kind, but the request was really for printing of the documents. Now, there are other ways that they could probably go about getting it out to the community. I know they like to circulate it in the hard copy, and that's largely what we pay. I could get behind a support to fund it less, not necessarily up to the $20,000, but to say gift in kind, it still doesn't help them with their printing costs because I feel they're going to do it anyway. So for me, I feel like vital signs is very important to our community. It's important to council, and we do contribute to a lot of the information that they provide, but they collate it and put it into one easy to read, easy to digest format for the entire region. So I can't get behind this motion because I know we gave it that gift in kind anyways. This is largely for the printing costs. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I will support the motion because I do think the gift in kind is the right approach. It might also be an eye-opener or time change of do we really need to be printing things. My concern from going to some vital sign launches last term was I feel like there was probably boxes and boxes of printed material that were left sitting around, and I'm not sure if they ever actually got distributed properly. So I think the gift in kind is the right approach. It shows we want to work with them. We are supplying them with the data, but I don't know if we necessarily need to be supplying printing if we're just trying to get data to our community.
I'm just going to jump in the queue. I think that I'll support this motion. I think that a significant amount of the work that is produced in this publication comes from the city organization, and it's great to recognize that it is gift in kind. That being said, I think there are other opportunities for this report to go ahead. It can be distributed electronically, obviously, but there are other opportunities for funding sources if this organization is looking for printing support. I think that we provide the bulk of this information. If Community Foundation wants to support us in putting forward a publication, I'd be interested in that conversation as well. Councillor Bressie, did I see you in and out? Okay. Councillor Blackmore to close.
I would ask you to support this motion because we do supply this information to them. It needs to be recognized as a significant amount of effort that the city puts together. And although we use that information in a lot of different ways, this is just one of those ways. In this day and age, I believe that printing the report is not effective or efficient. I know that when I get a paper copy of the report, I read it, and then it's gone. It goes into the recycling. I don't think that that is efficient use of resources. So I would ask you to support the motion.
Call the question. And that is carried. Next items on our referred list, the combined power unit. As discussed by administration, there is support requested or required for sound attenuation, and I'm looking for a motion for that. Councillor Blackmore.
I would move that we fund this request of $500,000, and the source of the funding will be.
Ms. Whiteway, the preferred recommended choice for funding source?
I would recommend capital tax or unallocated future expenditures.
How much is in unallocated future expenditures?
Thank you. 1.5 million.
I'm going to suggest we use capital tax for this, and the reason why is it's affecting the lives of people that are living adjacent to the Eastling Centre, and it makes sense to me then to use capital tax to move this forward. Speaking to the actual reconstruction or the fixing of the problem, we actually don't have a choice. We have to move forward, and we have to move forward fairly quickly. So I ask you to support the motion.
Thank you for that. The motion's in order. Question for administration. Ms. Whiteway, you got to tell me how this isn't facility renewal. It's enhancing a facility. It's saving on our energy costs, which is making the facility better. Why is this not, could it not be considered for facility renewal?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. No, it absolutely can. I had just provided what my first recommendation would be.
Okay. So I'd like to make an amendment, or possibly a friendly amendment would be considered to fund this from facility renewal.
Let's change the funding source to facility renewal in the motion. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Blackmore. Councillor Bressie.
Great. I can't support this because of the funding source. For me, facility renewal is about aging facilities, keeping them in the condition they're at. This is a new thing at that facility that's going to improve it in the long term, going to improve our cash in the long term, but that's not a renewal thing for me. And I'm worried we just took 1.1 million out of facility renewal. This would get that up to 1.6 million. And my understanding of how much we're currently funding facility renewal right now is we're funding it enough so that our long-term plans show that we'll keep the facilities at about the condition that they are right now. I'm not comfortable defunding that reserve so that we're saying, hey, we're not going to have enough money to keep our buildings at the condition they are right now. And so for me, it's just not an appropriate funding source.
Other comments or questions? Debate? Councillor Blackmore to close. Oh, Councillor O'Toole. Yeah, we got a lot of work to do.
Leave it at that.
Okay, I'm glad I stalled for that. No close required. Councillor Blackmore said, oh. Councillor Blackmore, you declined to close. We're good? Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. Carried 8-1. All right, next item that's on the deferred list, Nitehawk year-round adventure park came to us with $19,000, 125 capital request, as well as an $81,250 land lease request. Opportunity for discussion or debate. Looking for some business arising. Seeing none, we will move on. All right. Just to check, Ms. Whiteway, that's everything off the deferred list? Councillor Bressy, I think you gave me a heads up. You might have something else.
Yeah, thank you. It's not on the referred list, but it's something that's close to my heart, and I hope will be closer to Council's heart. I would move that Council add $10 million unfunded to the 2024 budget for Avondale redevelopment plan work. And just to speak to this, we're losing the old leisure centers going down on January 1st. Losing that field space is going to be a huge hole in our community. We've heard from soccer and we've heard from other sports about how that's going to have big impact on their programming. We've heard from the school boards about how that's going to have large impacts from them. I also think that this is an important neighborhood, so close to the hospital, so close to 2 high schools. When you look at a regional recreation needs assessment, you see that just across from the old bypass in Royal Oaks is the most reds on the map of defining socioeconomic needs of people who need recreation. So I think that this is a piece of land where indoor recreation is needed. And I think as we're tearing down indoor recreation, we should endeavor to get it replaced as quickly as possible. Right now, if this motion carries, it is unfunded, so that means it's not a final decision saying we're going to invest in this in 2024, but I think what this signals putting in our budget is I think it signals to administration, it signals to each other, and it signals to the community that Council's serious about advancing this conversation and making a decision point about what's going to go up there and when's it going to go on, so that we're at least having a conversation that could make a decision to ground break in early 2024, which is the earliest we could ground break there anyways with the old demolition. So I hope that Council will support this motion so that we can aggressively advance this conversation about what next when that leisure center is gone.
Thanks for that. And the motion is in order. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I just need a little bit of a clarification on the motion. Just the way I read it, it said the area, but I'm wanting to make sure it's specifically for a facility and not for us servicing and other things, because the way I heard it, it could be going to servicing, and I want to make sure it's actually going to a building.
It actually, in the motion, in the scribe says implementation of the Avondale redevelopment plan.
Yeah, and so to me, that implementation of a development plan might be us trying to build the road out to the bypass, and it could be us putting servicing and building. I want to make sure it's specifically actually.
Councillor Bressy?
Yeah, and I'm open to correction, but I believe that we've got $1 million set aside for it, and I believe that this is how we phrase that. So that's largely why I placed this. But there could be, I think the bulk of it should be going to a building, but when we get it, I don't know what's needed. There could be some work on pipes. There could be some work on roads needed. I don't know what's needed. So that's why I picked this word. And I'd be very open to friendly wording if that's what I need to do to get it passed. Because I think at this point, there are a lot of unknowns. Really, the intent of this motion isn't to be specific about this is exactly what's going on here. Even honestly, the 10 million is kind of picked out of the air. Really, the intent of this, though, is to put a phase in our budget, put a place in our budgets, show that council's serious about having a conversation about what exactly needs to happen in this area.
CAO Nicolay had something to add?
Perhaps just to bridge that, Madam Chair, if it's left as it's been worded by Councillor Bressy, it will have to come back in 2024 with details as to how that money might be spent. I think that would be an appropriate time to debate exactly what features might be funded through the 10 million. So we would take that under advisement at that time.
Okay, Councillor Blackmore.
I'm perfectly fine with the way the motion is worded. When it comes back, until it's funded, it's up in the air anyway. And when it comes back, we all know what that line item is for. It's not going to be a surprise to us. So I think that you can rely on the council to carry forth with the intent without any need to reword or wordsmith.
Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I guess, and I fully want to be supportive of this. I'm just curious what administration's thoughts are on, there's no funding allocated to working with user groups and getting that process started. So I'm just wondering what administration would do in the next year to figure out what we're building. If it's a court sport facility, a pool, I appreciate that we were trying to do something in that area. I just wonder how the consultation process would work and if they need to be having other allocated funding to actually get that advanced to make sure that we're actually in a position in a year to move forward with a property.
As it's an area redevelopment plan for now, I'll look at Mr. Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. The Avondale High School Sites Area Redevelopment Plan that was approved has kind of three land use concepts: a short term, a medium term, and a long term. In the long term, it does show a recreation facility in the southeast corner of the plan area, as well as sports fields to the north of that, potentially some residential and commercial development on the very northeast corner. And then to the west, it would still retain the Legion Field, add an additional pitch, and actually would essentially maintain parking and add some parking adjacent to the potential recreation facility is the long-term plan that was identified by council in that redevelopment plan.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Mr. Glavin, long-term in this example is how long?
Mr. Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Really, at the end of the day, the term is when funding arrives. So if funding arrived today to build a recreation facility, it's as soon as council funds it. But there was a transition over time that was initially contemplated, which was in the short term after the comp was demolished, that there could be sports fields. So a couple soccer fields could be put in place outdoor, retain the existing parking in the area. And then in the medium term, also identifies potentially putting that sports field, permanent recreation facility on the southeast corner, and then adding additional outdoor fields kind of in the northeast corner up until the point of the long-term concept coming to fruition with full servicing and the residential and commercial being built.
Thank you. I'm appreciative of the phases. The only concern I have is we seem to be dumping a lot of until next year into 2024, and I have concern about how high potentially our tax request will be to the public. So phases, I'm fine with that. I would support this motion, but I think we have to be cognizant of what's coming next year.
All right, Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of Councillor Bosch's comments. It's not just next year, it's the year after, and I'm sure we'll see that once our CFO gives us our tax rates for this year and going forward. But you know what? That's the hard work of council, and that's the hard work of our administration. They work very diligently to provide us the best information so that we can follow through with the plans that we need to make. I know how hard we've worked in this area as far as like brain power with multiple stakeholders and partners to redevelop this area. It's an important piece to our city, not just a road going through its buildings, its quality of life, its residencies. And I think it's a very thoughtful approach that Councillor Bressie has taken here to leave it unfunded. That leaves the hard work up to us and to administration to help us justify any spend that we may make going forward. And who's to say that we can't, in the end, borrow for some of this going forward? So I know all the good work that's been done, and I'm just looking at my fortune cookie that's attached to the top. It says, "Keep up the good work; you will be rewarded." So that's my hopeful thoughts going forward into 24, 25, 26 from here. But I will support this motion.
Right. Any further discussion or debate? Councillor Bresty to close.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the conversation. To address two things I heard, I really do hear the, hey, are we pushing a lot of stuff to 2024? But I don't think this is new. I think that this is something that years ago, we made the decision to tear down the Leisure Center. And in my recollection, part of that always was conversation about, all right, well, we're going to have to replace that eventually anyways when we do it. Years ago, we started the recreation cultural needs assessment, and a big part of that was figuring out what to do with this land. So I don't think this is a new thing. This is something that, frankly, I wanted to bring this motion 2 years ago, but I think we had consultation yet to go. And that speaks to my other point. There was an ask about is there money, is there time to engage residents? And my mind, and I'm a guy that's all about engagement. I think I've shown by my votes and my advocacy at this table that I really do believe in involving the community decision making. But I think we have significantly engaged the community in this already. We had a well-run process to create the redevelopment plan where we talked to the local community about what are appropriate land uses on the site. And we heard overwhelmingly recreation's an appropriate land use on the site. Then we went out and we spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort talking to user groups about what are the indoor and outdoor recreational needs of our entire community. And we've got that information before us. I think that we've been doing consultation for years to come replace the site. I think it's time for council to take that information, take what we've heard from the community, and make a decision about the future of the site. So my hope is that if this gets in the budget, we don't have to do a lot more community consultation because that's done. Council can make a decision and start moving the site forward so that we can act on what the community's been telling us for years. So I hope that council will support this motion. Thank you.
All right, that was Councillor Bressy's close. I'll call the question. Yep. Nope. Nobody made a motion. I'm assuming you're speaking to something next. Okay. That passed 8-1. Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Back to the list for motions.
I mean the list that I read out and asked anybody if they had any business arising. Okay, just so we're clear.
A little early. Need another coffee. I think we need to go back to the Nitehawk ask. The $81,250 for the lease and the $19,125 for the top up. Now the lease that's a partnership with all municipalities, right? To get those dollars in for this lease agreement.
Mr. Lemieux.
Thank you, through Mayor Clayton. So yes, that's our understanding is that would be the county's share.
City's share.
City
Or
share.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead and
City's share.
I'm happy if you can promise that the county's paying too.
My apologies.
I move that we allocate these funds to the ask of Nitehawk, both in the same motion. And speaking to this, Nitehawk is a jewel for our community and for our region. So I think we need to do our part and help them out. And they've had some unfortunate incidents in this last couple of years. So I think they just need a little better attention at the moment. You know, if we could fix that road, heck, we'd fix that road there too, but that's not our wheelhouse. So for now, I'd be happy if council supported these two asks.
And your recommended funding source, Councillor Bosch?
I look to Ms. Whiteway for that.
Ms. Whiteway?
Thank you, through the mayor. I would recommend capital tax to be the funding source for these items.
I'm okay with that. The residents of the city of Grande Prairie are the primary users of that ski hill. So I think we all have a responsibility to look after it.
Just a question for Ms. Whiteway and the funding source. Could the capital portion of it, the 19,125, would it qualify for financial stabilization? As this, or is this a specific? I can't recall what the ask was for.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. For financial stabilization reserve, it really is what council wants to use it for. So there's not a specific of parameters on that one. So I'll leave it with you guys to decide if that's what you'd like to use it for.
Mr. Lemieux, can you remind us what, I know what the land lease is, but what's the 19125 for? Do you recall? Oh, is utility expense increase?
That was part of it, from what I recall, is we've already approved a capital grant and they're asking for just a
Because of increased
top up.
costs?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So, Councillor Bosch, would you take a friendly amendment to fund that 19125 from financial stabilization and leave the 81250 as capital tax?
Absolutely.
Councillor Blackmore.
I'm going to ask for the motion to be split because I cannot support the 81,000. I believe that I'm happy to put money into the actual operation of the hill, but the bottom line is that land lays within the MD of Greenview, and I believe that the land lease cost, in my opinion, falls completely within their wheelhouse, and I'm not prepared to support that section. The other reason not to support that is that's not going to stop them from operating at this point in time anyway. Whether they have it or not is not going to change their operation. That's a long-term negotiation with the province, and they're not going to get cut off at the knees.
Councillor Blackmore, or sorry, Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I'm not speaking against the motion. I do have one question. Was slow to get in the queue. I was going to ask for the same thing for the same reasons as Councillor Blackmore. Just a question for administration. I know that we're talking about 2 items, but correct me if I'm wrong, but there are actually 3 requests that came from Nitehawk. One was for the land lease, one was for the top-up, and one was for the offset energy costs. And I
That already got approved in October.
that did get approved? Okay, cool. No, then I'll just speak to the motion, and it's very similar to Councillor Blackmore. I don't know what our role is in securing land lease agreements for properties in the MD of Greenview. I appreciate Nitehawk for all that they do, but this is, as much as it's a regional asset, it's also the MD of Greenview's asset on the MD of Greenview's land. And just like Councillor Blackmore said, I wonder if this is something that would prohibit them from operating. I don't think it is. I think that's something that they should engage with the MD about, and I don't know if we should be doing this unless we want to start talking land leases for the MD contributing into the city of Grande Prairie as an equalization to this, but we're not there, and so I can't support the second part of the motion. I will be supporting the top up, but not the extra ask. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Bosch to close.
I think I'd be fine with splitting the motions up. That's
Don't have a
okay.
choice.
It is done? Oh, don't
And a request to split it, just, yeah.
Okay, that's good. I guess what we think will happen in regards to will this affect Nitehawk? I don't want to base this decision on what we think. I want to know actually what's going to happen to Nitehawk if we don't do this land lease agreement. So I look to administration to find out the actuals, not the I think.
So, okay, sorry, Mr. Lemieux, before you go. My mistake. Let's, as the motion's been split, let's discuss and debate the Nitehawk funding capital top-up requests for 19125 first, okay? So discussion or debate around that. Seeing no one in the queue, and sorry, and it's to be funded, there we go. No, that's the other way around. Yeah, so the 19125 would be funded from financial stabilization. So discussion and debate on that. Councillor Bosch to close.
I have no close.
Okay, so I'll call the question on that one. Councillor Berg, how do you vote?
It's coming through.
Okay,
Opposed.
okay. So that carries 8-1. Now we're on to the vote, discussion and debate on the amendment of to the capital budget to include the Nitehawk funding request for land lease securities in the amount of $81,250 to be funded through capital tax. And Councillor Bosch, you had a question for administration.
I do. I'm just curious, is this like not ever been done before in regards to land leases and using it with Nitehawk? Is this brand new to us? First question. The second question is, I want to know what the outcome is for Nitehawk if we don't fund this.
Mr. Lemieux?
Yeah, I believe this is a relatively new change at the provincial level. And number two, in their presentation recently, Nitehawk made it clear that their top priority was for the 19,000, that the land lease security was something that is more long-term, and certainly I don't believe would have any impact on their operations at this time.
Okay. Then I can rescind that motion to fund it until we find out more information.
Okay. Seeing Councillor Plott, did you have something else for referred items?
Yes, Mayor Clayton. This is a motion, and I've talked about this quite a bit, but it's a motion to direct administration to bring back to the appropriate standing committee a process for user groups to repurpose existing commercial and industrial properties that could be used for user groups for sports and cultural facilities. And just to speak this a little bit now, I want to get a process started so user groups can put their thinking caps on and come to us. But I think administration's got to set some parameters. But even having the conversation, I think, is going to get user groups going. But I'd like to see that report come back and see what it looks like. It can be tweaked and it'll be moved around, I'm sure. But I think we need to get the conversation going on it sooner than later. There is a fair amount of buildings in our community that have been sitting empty that would actually be great and probably substantially cheaper than us trying to purpose build a lot of these facilities. So I would encourage us to support that.
Okay, I'll just wait for the motion. I had a question in regards, it in my opinion needs to have a intermunicipal lens in this potential sense that if a facility was available in the county or the MD, that the city would, through the funding, the support group, maybe support it. But, you know, so I just want to make sure. Standing committee process for.
And I'm fine with that. I guess I left it fairly open-ended for that reason. I just put process for repurposing existing commercial industrial property. Didn't say a boundary line on it. I just wanted to, because Mayor Clayton is correct. There's some fairly large properties out in the county right now that actually would make really good sense to be repurposed. So I would hope that motion would encapsulate. But if it needs
So
to
it
be
doesn't need
tweaked,
to, as long as administration's clear that, you know, the intent may not just be within our own boundaries. Okay, perfect. Discussion or debate on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. And that carries unanimously. Any other items for deferred? Ms. Whiteway, did I miss anything? Okay, so I would like to have, we have a couple items left. One is, go ahead, Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. Just to go now that one got approved, and thank you, I want to actually allocate some funding to it. I think the next thing is it's going to be great that a report comes back, but Councillor Brescia and I are talking about that. That could take months for the administration to come back. What I'd like to do in the meantime is let the community know as of today there's actually funding that's going to come with it. So my next motion is that we allocate up to $1 million from future expenditures reserves to help retrofit these facilities with a proper business case that has been approved by council to do so. And to speak to that, I think it's great that we say we want to do these things. If we're not going to put any funding for it, I don't know why soccer or volleyball or basketball or anybody, pickleball for that matter, would really come forward. I think this gets the conversations going right away, knowing that we actually are going to allocate some money to that. And in the meantime, while administration's working on that report and we did figure out the details, we got to have something in place. I appreciate that we put the $10 million potentially in a new building, but that building will go up for several years. And so if we don't find opportunities and ways to retrofit some buildings, our court sports are actually going to be down. We're going to have less facilities for 2 years than we currently have now, when we already know we're short facilities. So I'm really concerned if we actually don't allocate some funding to this, that it's just going to be a paper exercise and industry, or not industry, I guess it could be industry in this, but our user groups aren't going to realize that we're actually serious. We need to put some money where our mouth is, so to speak, on this one. And so I'm encouraging you to say up to $1 million from future, and I'm fine with a different funding source. The reason I chose that is it is a future expenditure. And realistically, just reminding council that it doesn't mean we're going to spend it. I put specifically in there a business case, because if they don't come with a good business case, we don't need to spend the money. I just, like Councillor Bressie with his earlier motion, want to earmark that we have funding available for that when that report comes back.
Discussion or debate? Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Councillor Bressie, or no, usually it's Bressie. Councillor Palat. My question is, we're putting money into privately owned buildings?
Councillor Palat.
It could be privately owned buildings, but until we get the report back, these privately owned buildings are still paying property taxes.
I realize that, but is it up to the city to make improvements to privately owned businesses when ultimately the outcome of profit goes back to the owner?
I guess for me, my hope and my intent is that we start looking like other cities where our user groups are actually running these facilities and taking ownership and running the facilities. It actually would probably lower our administrative costs if the city's not owning and operating these facilities. If we can help user groups get into facilities and retrofit an old Norland Chrysler or Hanson Ford or a Canadian Tire, those buildings have great value and they're in locations that actually make sense in our community in some areas. And so, and again, to speak to that, we can't build new anywhere near as cheaply as we can repurpose an older building. And we do have a fair amount of large buildings sitting empty that could be repurposed. So my intent is that we actually are working with these user groups to let them take ownership of these facilities. And I'm sure administration, through the report and us debating this report when it comes back, we'll figure out the details of what that looks like. So it's a little bit open-ended right now because there's a little bit of faith of what the process is going to look like. Again, I'm just trying to make sure that we actually start a process and put funding to it.
Agreed.
CEO Nicolay had a comment.
Actually, Councillor Plott just closed on the matter that I was going to raise. We, as part of the business case, we would absolutely look at detailing what kinds of things are movable between facilities. So ultimately, if this private building was sold, what would we take out of it and move to the next one? And what might be a permanent improvement to that, and who would benefit from that? So just on the basis of discussion to this point, we'll make sure that that detail is included in any business cases that come forward.
Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate this motion because I think we need to get creative about how do we fund recreation in a way that we're not the only ones funding recreation facilities. And I think this could allow us to get to a point there. I think that I can imagine scenarios. I think it's entirely appropriate if a nonprofit was signing a long-term lease for a building. I think it's entirely appropriate for us to potentially contribute to leasehold improvements that nonprofit needs to make. I can imagine a scenario where if somebody was doing something privately and they asked for a city contribution to secure free or highly subsidized use for a certain percentage of hours for nonprofit use or for lower socioeconomic uses, where that could be appropriate for us to dive into. And so I'm very comfortable with us having these conversations. Not saying I'm going to agree with funding that money at the end of the day, but I really think that there are opportunities to work with both the nonprofit and the private sector to get recreation that's accessible to residents of all income levels, but that isn't entirely publicly funded. So I think that this allows us to start getting creative and having those conversations. So I appreciate this. I've also heard from a number of residents that they see as a priority us figuring out what to do with some of the large empty commercial and industrial buildings we have in the community. And this helps with that as well. And when we can help one of those buildings get full, if it's privately owned, that helps our property tax base. And not just of that building, but of the other buildings around it. Empty space doesn't help us raise assessment values on other buildings that are even fully occupied. So I think that this is a thoughtful motion that will let us start getting creative with how we fund recreation. So I'm excited for it, and I hope that council will support it.
Councillor Blackmore.
I'm really supportive of this motion. As you know, I raised this topic a couple of days ago. It's not a new idea. Other communities are doing this. There's lots of information out there for administration to gather, and certainly, indoor soccer here talks to indoor soccer in Edmonton, talks to indoor soccer in Lethbridge. The user groups themselves will come up with some great ideas. I'm really encouraged by the idea that we are moving away from the city as the patriarch supplier of all things and asking user groups to join us to find creative solutions. So I'm very supportive of this motion.
Just make a comment. I think that supporting recreation without building brand new facilities is a great opportunity. I don't think it's realistic that sports clubs are going to own the building, though. We had a gymnastics facility that now is ours. We had a curling club that's now ours. We don't have a great history of user groups owning facilities. That being said, I think that there's opportunities potentially through a GP Sport connection, through municipality support of owning the building and intermunicipal consideration, that we could find some solutions here, so I will support the motion. With that, Councillor Palat to close if you want it.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I encourage us to support this because I do think that's a thing that I haven't mentioned yet is the opportunity to leverage external funding. There's grants that we can't actually go after as a municipality that user groups actually can. And I would hope, and it would be something I would push for when the report come back, is that there has to be some kind of, if we're going to give money, there has to be some kind of matching money as well. So maybe it's a 2-to-1 scenario or whatever, but if somebody's going to ask us for 500 grand, maybe they have to put in $500,000 of their own skin in the game. So I think through that report that comes back of my earlier motion, I think we can get to those things. But I do think that we'll be able to leverage our community much better and let these user groups take ownership of something. Let them actually have ownership of a facility, I think is important because many of them have passion and skills that is as talented as our administration are. We're not in those lanes. And I think we need to let those user groups shine and let them take those lanes and actually help fund them. So hope you can support the motion.
Call the question. All right, now I'm moving. Okay, how many other people have things that are going to get added? I'm just trying to manage time.
Sorry, Mayor Clayton. I just had one question for administration in regards to this. My head was moving, but just in regards to the leisure center demolition, I know a lot of times there's waste caused with demolition, but how much of the indoor sport court, I guess, things are we going to save? Like I know there's boards that were in the leisure center. Is that going down with the demo, or are we pulling that up and saving that? So there could be savings here that the city could also contribute if we decide to convert anything. But is everything getting torn down and thrown away, or are we saving stuff?
Sorry, Councillor Thiessen, I'll just clarify. Does that need to be part of this budget discussion, or can it wait to appropriate standing committee?
No, yeah, I guess it could wait till appropriate standing committee. Although, yeah, it looked like there was an easy answer across the way.
We have still some significant items to debate, but sure, go ahead if you want to give a quick answer, Mr. Miller.
Sure, I can, Mayor Clayton. So we are saving as much as possible, including the boards and the glass, and I think there's some netting as well, but we could bring more information back as part of the director's update if that's okay.
Perfect.
Thank
you. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. Staying in the sports team, I'm just curious, and a question for administration. There's a plan to work with the county on the Crosslink Center to potentially put soccer out there. I'm just wanting to know, I'm not sure the whole process, but I'm wondering to know if we need to be worrying about that at our budget to earmark money towards that facility, or if that's just something that is through ICC is going to potentially happen on its own.
Ms. Whiteway? Mr. Lemieux?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So there's still ongoing discussions at ICC. It might be a bit premature. I think we should wait until those discussions continue to evolve at ICC before I think it's too premature to sort of set money aside yet.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing something at budget. Thank you.
That being said, Ms. Whiteway, if there becomes a regional discussion of an expansion at the Crosslink Center and there's a consideration for the City of Grande Prairie to financially support it, what would the opportunities be for funding sources? Can we take debt on a facility in another municipality?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. It's something that I probably would want to take away and bring back with more detail at a future date.
Great. Okay. All right, so Council, we have an in-camera item. We have roads. We also potentially have an update from administration of where we stand tax-wise. I'm going to suggest we do the in-camera item right now, so I'm looking for a motion to go in camera. Councillor O'Connor, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. We will be back within, I'd say, 10 minutes. Thank you. Good morning and welcome back to Budget Deliberations 2022. We are on the home stretch here, I tell you. So there was one item that was identified. Administration let us know that for council to have consideration of. On our referral list, the fire training grounds item. This was a intermunicipal potential training ground supported in principle by the county and the MD. And I know Councillor O'Toole had business arising.
I'd like to bring this forward, the fire training grounds for 500 to be in this budget.
And Ms. Whiteway, the preferred or suggested funding, was it capital tax? I can't, okay.
And
with that, Councillor?
Yeah, and with capital tax.
All right. So that motion's in order. Discussion or debate on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Bressy in favor.
Councillor O'Connor? How do you vote?
Vote in favor.
Thank you. All right. We are now going to go to roads. I'm just trying to get to the right page. Give me 1 second. Somebody give me a page number. Thank you. Thank you. All right, there we go. So on page 3 on your capital budget items, page 23 identifies we are on the item where it's roads existing. There's multiple funding sources there, as you'll see, and that's the last item to deal with today. There is an update that I'm just going to let those who are watching be aware of. Currently, the roads existing capital tax would be at $916,000 for 2023. The roads existing CCBF, which is a Canadian Building Fund grant, for 2023 would be $2.2 million. The roads existing right now in the capital tax under future expenditure reserves would be $640,000 for 2023. And the roads existing MSI, as currently put forward, would be $7.244 million. And then in existing, unfunded, nothing for 2023. So the other numbers in 2024, et cetera, haven't changed. Those are the current amounts within each funding source. Correct, Ms. Whiteway? Okay, we're good. Discussion, business arising. So I'd look for a motion and then we'll discuss and debate. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. For me, I'd like to see us move down our road budget a little bit. So I'm going to make a motion that we defund road projects for $1 million via capital tax. And just to speak to that, I think there's a lot of construction fatigue that's happened the last few years. And I think with defunding it by $1 million, we're still doing a lot of roads next year. So I'm confident that we'll still be able to move enough projects forward and the major projects that need to happen without this $1 million.
All right, that motion is in order. I'm going to recognize, there's only 916. So what would happen to the rest of the million if approved, Ms. Whiteway?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So the $84,000 difference, we would reduce the future expenditures reserve funding.
Perfect. I'm going to recognize Councillor Berg so I don't forget him. So as he's online and I might miss his hand. So go ahead, Councillor Berg.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Clayton. This is one that I put some thought into overnight, and it's one that I'm not in support of, quite simply because earlier in this term, we identified that we're in an infrastructure deficit. And I think by pulling out some road projects, that'll put us in a further deficit and leave a burden to future taxpayers and future council. So as much as I love the intention of it, and I would love to spend less money, I think it puts us in an unfortunate situation moving forward. So this is one that I cannot support.
Okay. Councillor Bressy.
Great. Thank you. My apologies if it's already been provided to us, but could I get reminded again where after the things we've done, our capital tax amount is sitting right now?
Sure. We can get an update. Ms. Whiteway, would you be able to give us a current status of where our overall tax amount would be in a combination of budget, of operating as well as capital combined?
And sorry, for me, great if you want combined, but for me, I really care about where we're at. Are we planning to spend more or less capital tax than was originally recommended?
Okay, so maybe you can answer both questions. Thanks.
Okay, just bear with me. Did you want, sorry, Councillor Bressie, would you like including this motion or prior to this motion?
Prior to this motion, please.
Could I just have maybe 1 minute and I'll have that number?
Come back to you. Councillor Blackmore.
I am going to support this motion. I think that we have not had very many opportunities in this budget to address capital tax. That is, the tax that we are collecting from people every year. Keeping in mind that not only is the city undergoing extreme inflation pressures, so is every one of our residents. And I feel that we need to do all that we can to accommodate this year. Are we looking at less inflation in 2024, 2025? Well, hopefully, yes. And so this is not an issue that I have, I don't feel that losing $1 million out of roads is going to be a significant worry at this time in this year. More of a worry is inflationary costs, both on us and on our residents.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Clayton. Thanks for your comments, Councillor Blackmore. I couldn't agree more. I tend to roll back to our last term, and Councillor Platt and I were always trying to find savings on our roads, on our sidewalks, and stuff like that. That's generally a bulk of where capital tax comes. I know we have an infrastructure deficit. I think we may never overcome that. It's a dream, but I'm hopeful that one day we will. I know that over the last term and at the start of this term, we have pumped a lot of money into roads. It's not just construction fatigue. We've put in probably, I'm going to guess, I don't know the exact numbers, but close to $70 million in roads over the last 2.5 years, 3 years, at least that amount. And I know that our overall road budget construction before inflation had already grown by 3 or 4 million from my first term. On a year-over-year basis. I still remember we used to only chunk in $7 million for roads, and now we're in the double digits and higher, getting close to the 20s in a lot of things just on our annual spend, not on the extra spend. So I like this motion. I think what we can do to reduce the taxes in any way, shape, or form are kind of limited. Either we go after operations, which are operations running really efficient and really lean, and I'm really proud of our staff and our organization. But capital tax is really where we can address it on a year-over-year basis by making smart choices at the right time. And I think after seeing our road construction and what's going to come on, we have plenty of awesome projects. My biggest priority personally is that Highway 43, and this isn't going to chunk out of that. And I think we can defer projects to later years too through this reduction. So thanks for the motion, Councillor Platt. I'll be supporting it.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I concur with both Councillor Blackmore and Councillor Thiessen. Absolutely. I think there's limited dollars that we can snag from operating. They're running pretty lean right now. And just this morning, half of this dollar value is taken up by the CHP unit. So money has to come from somewhere. And outside of the CHP, just the deferred items that we approved this morning, that's all part and parcel of this $1 million reduction on the other side. So there has to be give and take. And right now, quite frankly, people don't have the capacity to pay more through taxes. And so is it ideal that we don't work on our roads for that $1 million value? No, but it'll come.
Councillor O'Toole. Oh, sorry. Ms. Whiteway, you had information now?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clayton. Just back to Councillor Bressie's request. So we originally had proposed just over 11 million in capital tax, so 11,026,700. At this time, capital tax will be 10,036,700.
Go ahead.
And sorry, that's 10,036,000, and that's before this motion. So if this motion passes, it go down to 9 million.
Correct.
Okay, so 2 million less than originally recommended.
Correct.
Did you say a percent, Ms. Whiteway? I missed it.
No, Mayor Clayton, I didn't. Would you like me to update the operating? Okay.
That's combined is what, yeah.
So Currently, with the motions that have passed, the tax rate increase for 2023 would be 2.46%.
Thank you. Councillor O'Toole.
Yes, I do appreciate the motion that's on the table right now. As was stated in the motion in discussion, the citizens of Grande Prairie are under a little bit of stress from they couldn't move sometimes, you couldn't get to where you wanted to. And I think we need a little bit of a break this season coming up. Stores were down a lot on percentages because they couldn't get relatively easy access into their stores. So with that, I just think we need to take a break this year, and I'm supporting that 100%.
Councillor Bressie.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I can't support this motion. I'm all for looking for ways we can reduce taxes, but for me, it's important we do that on the operational side because I'm worried that this just creates a bow wave of tax increases in the future if we're doing this on the capital side of the budget. Let's be real here. We're talking about $1 a household a month. It's not a huge amount of money. But what happens on the capital tax side is that's not just a one-time thing. Now, if we're using this to get taxes down by an extra percent and a half, if we do that on the operational side, those are tax savings that go forward. We never have to catch up on that 1.5% that we lost. But now what happens is if we want to continue investing in roads next year to keep them going, that means that we've taken 1.5% out this year. Well, now that's our tax increase that's looking at 4% next year. All of a sudden is looking at a 5.5% increase. And for me, the capital side of the budget isn't where we find taxpayers' long-term savings. We find that on the operating side. So for me, I can't support this. I think we should be keeping our capital budget at about the originally recommended amount and looking to the operating side if we want to get taxes down.
Councillor Platt, I'll come to you to close. Councillor O'Connor, and then I'll get in the queue.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clayton, and I concur with what Councillor Bressie says. I think it's important. I love the intent of this, but if we're going to see, huge increases in taxes next year, we've got, or the following year, we're going to have a number of initiatives that are going to hit us very, very hard. So I don't think people will enjoy a larger tax increase in the next 2 years. So I won't support this motion.
All right, just two quick administration questions before I have something I wanted to identify. Mr. Glavin, to your knowledge, are there many warranty paving projects that will happen in 2022-3? So just sort of background on that for those who are interested. Every year, there are many types of projects that happen in road rehabilitation, paving, etc. Some of them are simple overlay, some of them are rehabilitation and bigger projects, some of them are warranty work from previous work that didn't pass our inspections, some of them are stormwater. So traffic and construction fatigue isn't always just the city. So in consideration for those of you who are making this decision based on construction fatigue, I think it would be valuable to know what projects we know that aren't city projects, such as warranty, Aquaterra, other identified sources might be happening in our city. Mr. Glavin.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So with regard to warranty, I don't have any confirmed warranty work that's scheduled for next year. As far as Aquaterra, they will be having to do some additional construction on 84th Avenue that was previously shut down a couple years ago. So that will happen likely in the summer construction season of 2023.
On the west end of 84th?
Correct, over on the west side, over on 116th at West Point.
Okay. All right. My next question to confirm is Whiteway. The future expenditures reserve has money identified for Old Highway 43X. How much is potential, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's $8.25 million left after this 9.75 is spent this year. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So I will support this motion. I understand Councillor Bressy's concerns, but when you look at next year's potential work to be done, putting that million from this year to next year won't have nearly as much construction impact. And the fact that the programs that are proposed for 2024 in regards to rehabilitation on Old Highway 43 go from 9.7 to 1.7. So that and that still does not have a financial impact on our residents. So I think that reducing the $1 million this year, that my subsequent motion would be that $1 million gets identified in projects for next year right away, so that we're aware that that project is that work, if moved, will happen next year. A big thing, I think, couple things. We know that we're at the height of costs right now. Not to say they won't continue to climb, but we're at the height of costs of construction, supply. We know as a municipality, with work that has gone on through various projects, as mentioned, warranty work, Aquaterra work, storm sewer work, that the mobility within our community on our arterials and our residential was significant last year. My concern is at spending 19, almost $20 million if approved as proposed, will make our construction season even worse. Last year we spent about $17.5 million, and we saw the impact. The year before we were approximately $18 million. There's been multiple years of significant construction impact on our residents. This year, by removing $1 million out of this year and putting it to 2024, won't impact the financial because we're not forecasting to spend as much in roads next year. We don't have as many big projects left, for example, in the rehabilitation of Old Highway 43. So saving that not only impacts people's wallet books today, when we know that times are extremely tight. We know we're supporting organizations such as the Salvation Army in food needs. We know that our community pays extremely high utility bills, and as a council, we're working very hard on that advocacy. We know that people are struggling. The entire province, the country, the world, you hear it across the board right now. People are in a tough time. So if we can postpone this $1 million to next year, when we're going to have less allocated construction on existing roads, I think it would not only benefit people's wallet books, it would benefit our quality of life because we'd have less stress from construction. Thank you. Councillor Platt to close.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. It was fun digging back through my 18 and the last 5 years of budgets. In 18, we were around $9 million, as Councillor Thiessen alluded to. Last year in the 4-year budget cycle, the peak that we got up to was around $17.5 million. This budget's still almost $1.5 million higher than any capital spending we've done on roads that I can recall in our history. So we've actually added to roads this year. Even with this reduction of $1 million, we're actually adding to the road budget we had last year. So for those opposed, I can understand you worried about a long-term deficit of this. I guess I would argue that this council and the previous councils put more money into roads than was even expected to put into roads. We've increased the budget by a lot. And so I don't think we're doing a disservice when we've actually almost more than doubled the budget of what it was 4 years ago, even with this reduction. So I would encourage you to support this.
All right, that's Councillor Platt's close. Call the question. Councillor O'Connor? O'Cool.
Councillor Cool votes in favor.
All right.
I can listen.
That is carried 8-1. I had a follow-up motion, and maybe we don't need a motion. Mr. Glavin, can we assume that $1 million removed today will automatically go in 2024, or would you like direction?
Sorry, just so I understand, you're asking the $1 million that was removed today, we would add to 2024?
Do you want direction for that, or will it automatically be done?
Yeah, we'll reassess over the course of the year and bring back a recommendation for next year.
I saw Councillor O'Connor in, but you're out. You're good. Okay, I also had another question for Mr. Glavin. without knowing what's happening on the construction plan in regards to road rehabilitation within residential areas, we know some of the arterials, et cetera, the work that'll be done. I think it's really important, and I know administration does a very thorough job of having the least amount of impact as possible. Would you like some direction in regards to how important that is to council in regards to taking projects that may be engineered and designed, but splitting them up through quadrants of our city? Arterials, I know, are a primary concern for movement of traffic, but residential road impact is significant too. If you get up and go to work in the morning and the first thing you see is a delay on your own street, you probably start your day in a really bad mood. Then you get out into the community and our arterials are impacted. So consideration for splitting the residential work across the community would be favored, but I'm happy to have that discussion if you'd like specific direction.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. I don't think we need specific direction. With that, we will this year do our best to try and distribute it throughout the city, just for everybody's knowledge, with the caveat that a lot of this has been designed this year, so that would be something going forward will be easier to implement, but we'll do our best to mitigate for next year.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Anything on roads that I'm missing, or Ms. Whiteway, is there anything that we've missed in regards to items for discussion or debate? Okay, so do you want to do a recap, or do you need another minute? Go for it, Ms. Whiteway.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor Clayton. So based upon all of the motions made and passed, the operating budget for 2023 will require a 1.71% increase to taxes. This is approximately an annual municipal tax bill for an average family home of $3,121. And it does leave capital tax at $9,120,000.
All right. Can I make a motion to direct administration to bring back a report in the new year identifying mid-sized city comparables? I'd like to see across the province and mix mid-size and large. I would like to see, and I'd like to see it over a 4-year trend of the rate increases as well as the price per year per household on the same. If we pick a $300,000 house as the comparable, let's see it across the board. So if you wouldn't mind bringing that report back in January, once the other municipalities have had a chance to have the budget deliberations. Councillor Bressie.
Great. I'm just curious, so this still has to come to council for final approval, and there's opportunities to potentially amend it then. And I'm still worried about the bow wave of potentially having half inflation area increase this year and leading to a potentially double inflationary increase the following year. When this comes back to council, if you don't have it right now, Ms. Whiteway, that's fine, but will you be able to project the 4-year tax increase when this comes to council?
Ms. Whiteway?
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Yes, I'll have that available. I can do an introduction at the next, when it goes through for approval, I believe on the 28th, and then I'll provide the all 4 years.
Great, thank you, I appreciate it.
Great. Comments or questions on my motion for that report to come back in January to show the comparables? Seeing none, I'll call the question. That's all right. No, that's okay.
Councillor O'Connor in favor.
Councillor Berg, how do you vote?
Sorry, I had to step away. I won't vote on this one.
Okay, he'll remove himself from this. Yeah, I look forward to that report. I think that there's been significant work done by this council and previous councils and administration to identify areas of opportunities for savings and being fiscally responsible. I know that we have done a great job of keeping taxes at a consistent either reduction or as close to zero as possible. And often we're compared to municipalities that haven't had that opportunity. So on a daily basis, I got an email yesterday that said, you're X number percentage higher than every municipality in Alberta, and that's not correct. So I look forward to seeing that report. I will just open this for opportunity to see if anybody has anything else. Councillor Blackmore.
I feel that this council should give ourselves a pat on the back because we worked hard over the last 4 days, and we didn't quite have the recommended tax increase. We got it from 3 to 1.7. That shows remarkable work in times of significant pressure, and so I think that I'm proud of my fellow councillors for the work you've done this last 4 days. However many days we've been trapped here.
Agreed. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, I'd like to thank council. This worked out really, really well, and we pretty much got what we wanted. There's a few things that were nice to have, but we really didn't need them. And with tight spending these days, I think we made the right decisions. But I'd like to give a corporate leadership team and all their support for making sure that we got the information that we needed to make some decisions, because without you, we would be still sitting here making decisions because we didn't know how to make them. And with that, I think we all need to give you an applaud. So here we go.
Councillor Thiessen.
Oh, geez, I was just going to say that. I was like, what did Gladys leave unsaid? But no, equally, I thanks for saying that, Councillor O'Toole, because really, Council, we sit around here and we try to determine what the best course is by communicating with the public and by communicating with our administration. But really, the backbone of this organization is our administration, our corporate leadership team, and all the people that are helping us find solutions for the people in our community. So we should be proud. But I'm even more so proud of the support that council has been given over the years, and that we've been able to maintain this. And looking to my crystal ball, it looks pretty good actually going forward in the future. I think when we come to budget next year, we'll have more solutions, and administration will have more plans for us to implement so that we can stay on the right track and serving the highest priorities of our community. So thank you very much.
All right, Councillor O'Connor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clayton, and I really appreciate the thanks that have gone out to the CLT and the team. But I'd like to make a special thank you. This is my first budget that I actually had some input on, and it was so well prepared. It made it easier to make decisions. And compliments to your team.
All right, Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Clayton. I just want to keep echoing the comments as somebody that was just elected a month ago. I made an awful lot of motions that I appreciate the support on. Those motions would have happened without the support of CLT and our chiefs of staff, our city manager, and I know all the people that are texting you guys the information. 4 years ago, at my last big capital or this big budget, there was a lot of questions that were left unanswered, and I didn't feel like there was a single question that this council threw at him on the cuff as we're trying to react to the community that wasn't answered diligently. And so not only I want to appreciate everybody that we can see in the room, I can't imagine how many people were texting you and emailing you with support. So I want to thank all the people that aren't sitting in this room right now, because I know they're also very supportive of what's happening in this organization. So I really appreciate it. I'm much more confident in this organization than I was 4 years ago. And a lot of that's from the people sitting in the room and the leadership you've shown to actually have those people want to get you that information in a timely fashion. So thank you for your leadership.
Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Mayor Clayton. Yes, I want to echo the sentiments of my fellow colleagues. Congratulations and well done to the entire team, administration team, and the quality of work and collaboration between you and your teams and you and this team on this side of the room is greatly appreciated. So it doesn't go unnoticed, and I hope that our community actually sees how much work you put into making our community the best mid-sized city in Canada.
Councillor Bressie. I'm hoping you're going to do the business that's still left. Okay,
yeah, that's
good. Okay, good.
That was complete my intent.
Good.
I'm wondering, Mayor Clayton, can I do all three motions at once?
Sure. I see no need to split them.
So I would move that committee recommend council approve the 2023 operating budget and the 2023 capital budget as amended, and the committee committee recommend council give 3 readings to bylaw C 1395J. An amendment to the fees, rates, and charges bylaw. I've seen them moving around.
It's there now.
Gotcha. And further, the committee recommend council approve in principle the 2024 to 2026 operating capital budgets as amended. And just speak to this, I want to echo my colleagues. I look at the last 5 years, and it's remarkable the headwinds that we've had that should be raising taxes over the last 5 years. It's everybody in the world is facing inflation. We're also facing massively increasing RCMP costs. We're facing big cuts in our budget from the provincial government. And we're also facing, we've added services. We've added the mobile outreach program, an outdoor pool, turf stands at the CKC campus, driveway windrow removal over the last 5 years. And yet this is put on this line of taxes have barely got up over the last 5 years, where they should be a double-digit increase if we kept business as usual. And I know that that's been a tremendous amount of work from our staff that have made that happen. And I don't think we've done it by gutting core services. Like I said, we've actually enhanced services. I'm tremendously proud of the work to find cost savings. And also somebody up here at the high-level governance role. Years ago, I felt like I really was voting in the dark mostly. I really was going by my gut of what we should do. But there's been a tremendous amount of work done, as has been acknowledged, to make sure the council's really got the information we need to make good decisions. And I feel that every vote I've made in the last 4 days has been very well informed with all the information I needed. So I just really want to commend the professional work that our staff have been doing. It really is tremendously helpful for our community as well as for council. So thank you to our staff, and I hope council supports these motions.
Call the question. Councillor Berg, are you with us? Okay, we'll leave that one. Councillor O'Connor?
In favor?
That carries unanimously. So I won't echo the sentiment that has been shared by my colleagues. However, as Councillor Bressy mentioned, we've done significant work in comparison to many municipalities. We know that over the past 5 years, with approximately 1% tax increase, rate of inflation have been double digits, close to 15. We know that the proposed inflation currently is at 6%, and this council proposed a 1.7% increase, while still adding services, while still adding neighborhood amenities, while still improving the quality of life, and touching the items that were identified in the budget, in the community engagement studies. We know roads are a priority. We know community safety is a priority, and we've continued to support those and increase the expenditures on some of those items. So I really want to thank the CAO, the chiefs, everybody who was part of the budget. I know Ms. Whiteway's team puts a ton of hours into this project, as does the entire organization. I just want to say that it feels really good to walk away from this budget, although at times I'm sure it was straining on administration as we go through things line by line, but people were elected to represent the people that voted for them. And with that, there needs to be thorough consideration and time addressed to the items that were put forward. And I think we did exactly that. We had a very thorough look at what was important to our community, what was important to this council and this organization. And from that, I think we made very solid decisions. So I thank you all for being here. I thank you for your time and patience and for your hard work. And I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.